Good morning. Welcome to Talking Devils, the leading independent Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Barton, joined by David Murphy. Dave, what shall we talk about today? I'm sure we can find a way to fill 45 minutes to an hour. How are you doing? You had a good week?
Yeah, had a good week indeed. Now we're into a bank holiday week. I've taken a week off. I've taken vacation time, as they say in America. So yeah, um, I think it's we got 3 games in this week. Erik has already started to ruin that week. Probably ruin it even more on Wednesday, and then on Sunday, um, we'll win, and then he'll prolong the agony for another week. Anyway, I've had a good week, Wayne, and you?
Does not sound very good, but yeah, we were talking last week just before we went off about what your daughter Alana was doing with the fundraising, and she's had the best week of everyone, hasn't she? She did amazing at the event that was held for the fundraising was on Saturday night, right?
Yeah, she finished third, which was like pretty phenomenal out of 23 roses. Um, as we've said in the past, she's the only entrant that is actually has it. Is part of the disability community. So the finish third out of 23 roses was pretty phenomenal. She raised just over 6,300 euros in total. So yeah, we had a gala night on Saturday, and yeah, she was pretty hyper and just stayed in bed all day Sunday, like winners do. So
Yeah. Well, that's the good news. Let's get on to the bad news. Johnny's given us a comment straight away to get into. Good morning, Johnny. Hope you're doing well. I don't know if Johnny's your name, if that's just what you put on the username, but good to see you anyway. It says, morning, gents. Hope you're both well. Refs need to be made to write reports, and those can be requested by clubs. Independent reviews needed. Officials need to be accountable and answerable. Yes. And Dave, as you can see, is ultra professional today to read the comments as well, rather than just take my word for what's being said on the
yeah,
screen. We'll get on to that. Obviously, Johnny's talking about the beautiful refereeing decisions yesterday in both Premier League games. Well, in both the United's and the Arsenal Liverpool game as well. There was a couple more being played, weren't there? But yeah, come on, let's get talking about it. Manchester United lose 2-1 at West Ham. A game where United looked in charge for long periods ends with some wildly difficult moments. The pattern of the game, United started quite well. You start to think when they don't score one of the multiple chances that they're getting, are we actually playing well, or are West Ham just actually playing really badly? And the answer will come in the reaction. The reaction was Lopetegui makes the changes at half time. United are slow to respond. They were nowhere near as bad as they were, and all those second balls United weren't even winning second balls in the first half. There was nothing to say that there was anything particularly aggressive about the play. But then when those duels, when those kind of altercations came up, United were second best. They were slow, and we're all over the place. United struggled to respond to West Ham's changes, but they did respond to the goal. So we concede a goal. Somerville scores, gets in front of Dallo. Some bad defending to create that chance. And then, United do react. They score straight away, pretty much. And you think, well, the tide's back with United. The players have stood up and responded. This is only going to go one way. Then it goes one way, but the referee decides to sprinkle a little bit of magic into proceedings, and they get a penalty. We'll talk about the penalty in isolation, of course, but I mean, it's a very, very difficult game to call because I'm just going to come through some of the comments before I continue the point because there's a load coming in already. Johnny says, it's a username. Johnny Utah is Keanu Reeves' character in Point Break. Well, there you go. Shows how much I know about films. Dan says, can you talk some sense into Dave?
by the way, before we move on from that, I knew from the initial comment it was Dan, and I just thought it was, and then he confirmed it.
Yeah, okay. Well, there you go. That's because he's got his glasses on and he's super smart today. I've been trying for a decade to try and talk sense into him. Hasn't happened, won't happen. So don't worry about that. Johnny says the loss isn't on Ten Hag. West Ham were there for the taking, poor finishing on the players this time. And Steve says, sorry, Ten Hag needs to go, but who do we bring in? All right, so this is a point, right? So let's not talk about the penalty. The penalty is its own thing. We'll talk about the game itself and the game management. United, they did play well in the first half, but you were wondering if this is accident or design, or is it down to West Ham, or is it, United are really stepping up a gear here? And I think we all found out the answer by the events of the second half. So when you leave yourself open, and United have left themselves open to this kind of chaos that dictates results, good and bad, by the way. We've benefited from that chaos, and we've suffered on the sword of it many, many times as well. You do start to think where it's a systemic error. You start to wonder if there's a design flaw in there that the manager can't fix, and he's not controlling because everything is being left down to this. Now, you can't put the manager on the pitch and finish the chances, but you can only use that excuse for so long, right? Like draws in a run of results. You say, are these good draws or are they bad draws? You only find out in hindsight. So you can be clever about it afterwards and say, oh, it was going wrong, blah, blah, blah. Likewise, with goals, with these chances, eventually they'll either start to be scored or they'll start to dry up, and the players who are there aren't even creating them anymore, and the players don't pick up the prolific nature of goal scoring. And that's kind of where we are. And you're watching the games and wondering which side of the fence it's going to fall on. But at the moment, it's not falling on a positive side for Ten Hag, and he's not showing as the players come back and he's got fewer injuries to really complain about. They've got greater balance in the side. It's a really tricky one because United are controlling games and they do look fairly more solid, but they are prone to these absolute chaotic moments which influence the games. And at that point, if you leave yourself open to stuff like that being hugely influential in the way that it determines a result, you have to question the manager's control. I know, Dave, the tide's turned as far as you're concerned with Ten Hag and feeling that a change should be made. And I think we probably reached that point with the Spurs game recently. But on isolation, looking at yesterday's game, up until the penalty kicks, the penalty decision, sorry, talk me through what you think of Erik Ten Hag's approach to that game and why he deserves criticism or why he deserves not to be criticised for it.
Well, I mean, there's anyone that watched the game, you can't argue with the fact that we should have been 2-3, 4-0 up by halftime. I get that. I really do. Some of the chances that we missed were criminal. They really were. But to me, that's a sign of a team that just has no confidence. It really doesn't. And the confidence has to come from the manager. And I don't believe the manager is instilling the confidence anymore in the team. And this is the very reason why I think his time is up. His time was up a couple of games ago. But if he wants to talk about in isolation, but we can't. We really can't. We've won 7 or 8 games in 30. We've won 1 in the last 7 or 8. Most managers, nearly all managers, get sacked. That's the problem for that. Yeah. But we have this thing now where we constantly keep making excuses for the reason why we're not winning. And most people will point out that Ten Hag can't score the goals, and that's right because he's not on the pitch. But the buck stops with him. He has to change something, and he hasn't. He hasn't changed anything. We're still going with the same players every week, and nothing's working. He'll swap players out. He'll swap players in every now and then. That make absolutely no sense. But given the first half yesterday, we should have been light years ahead, and we wouldn't even be here. We'd be laughing about the decision. For that actually ultimately became the winner. People like, well, it was irrelevant, because we were 5 or 6-1 up at that time.
Let me just ask though, on that point. But obviously, we are going to talk about the penalty itself, so don't worry, everyone. We've got lots to say on that. But let's say United are 4 goals up from that period. Are you any more convinced in Ten Hag then? Are you on this podcast then saying there's something to build upon?
No, because we went and smashed Southampton 3-0, and then it all fell apart again. West Ham are in complete disarray. They've been absolutely chaotic and brutal for the season. And United roll up and they get beat 2-1. forget about the circumstances. It's well, I'm not. I don't mean forget about all the circumstances, but we can't. Even if United had won 4-0, you can't take much from that game because of how bad West Ham are. But we didn't. Once again, we lost, and once again, we're sitting here saying, "Well, it's not the manager's fault that we can't score." I'm sorry, it is. He plays part of the blame there. He really does. And Solskjaer got sacked for less. Van Gaal got sacked for less. We have this thing where we have to hold on to a manager because there's too much change. I don't believe so anymore. I think football has completely changed. You don't hold on to a manager for nostalgic reasons because we had one for 26 years and because Arsenal had one for, 12, 13 years. Those days are long gone, long gone.
But we'll talk about Ten Hag and that decision to hire or fire or stick or twist. But talk about the events of the game, because obviously the biggest criticism against Ten Hag for yesterday's game. By the way, let's come to a few more comments. Dan says United, by all accounts, wanted a winger during the summer. You can see why. The manager wants a striker to come short to let the wingers cut inside to score. But we don't have those players. Patrick, good morning, mate. He says yesterday's match wasn't directly down to Ten Hag. However, 4 defeats in 9 added to last season's debacle in the league. As a good friend of mine said, he's sacking himself. Matt says we can control a half, not a full game, and that's the issue. Yeah, and we'll talk about this in a second with whether or not we did actually control that. Johnny says that's a good point, Dave. Well, there you go. A broken clock can be right twice a day. Mike says, good morning, gents. Erik Ten Hag's time is up. He has his defence. These are his strikers he wanted, strikers who can't score. He bought Ugarte but doesn't play him. Dalot keeps playing and he's awful. And Dan Collar really struggled at Everton. Is he a bad manager? No, he struggled due to the environment. That is the bigger issue. And Rory, good morning, mate. Hope you're doing well. He says, ultimately, the results just aren't good enough. 14th in the league after 25% of the campaign. 21st in the Europa after 3 out of 8 games. It really isn't good enough. Probably lose on Wednesday and Sunday too. That's the spirit. But the control of that, the second half, we're so passive in West Ham react. They make the changes. They control the off. And like I said, it wasn't a particularly good response from West Ham. They were just more aggressive in, running the game. And United was slow to respond to that. I mean, they did respond eventually, but I think what happened in the end, I don't even think it was a tactical switch that did it. I think it was the confidence being stung by conceding. They just stepped up, which they should have done. They should have been more aggressive. The players should have taken that on themselves. But there should have been some kind of communication in there, because it didn't seem like the players were ready for a more aggressive West Ham. Because nobody could have expected that they would have been as bad as that in the second half, right? So that's the problem with the manager, is that West Ham reacted to how passive it was, and they didn't have to be particularly good. Gary Neville said on his Sky podcast afterwards, saying that teams who are half decent can really take United on. And he was talking, he basically did a body gesture, raising the shoulders, like saying if the team's got that about them, they're likely to get a good result against United. And that's what happened in the second half, really, regardless of the penalty. We'll get to the penalty, like I said. But that's what turned the game, and United couldn't react to that. And Ten Hag showed no response to it, apart from an obvious switch with Rashford and Ahmad. But even that didn't seem to really work, because by then, the flow of the game had changed and United were slow to get it back into control. I mean, they stood up, they got the equaliser, and then it was left to force. We don't know how it would have ended. We have no idea how it would have ended, but we know that what we did to get ourselves in that position was so poor that you leave yourself susceptible to that kind of thing. That's poor control, or poor control of a game and poor control of your squad, and it bodes poorly for what we can hope for in terms of like the future. So yeah, what did you make of the second half building up to the penalty? I mean, it didn't get better, did it? And I mean, that's probably the strongest criticism of Ten Hag yesterday, is that he comes out and he says we played well for an hour. That's being very generous. We played well for maybe 40 minutes, and West Ham were already before half time, sort of clocking on to what we were doing, and they were closing it down a bit better. I mean, look at some. Let's before we get to that, let's talk about the quality of some of the chances, because Dalot misses a golden opportunity. Rashford has one chance where he can't get it out of his feet. West Ham hit the bar with one of their own players. Garnacho hit the bar.
Hoyland.
Hoyland as well, yeah. Good term, but just no conviction in the finish. And I mean, that's kind of like United, no conviction all over the pitch is kind of like where that's the kind of thing, right? And they just, I don't know. Everything that is problematic with United seemed to rear its head at different stages yesterday. And if you do leave yourself open to what happened later on, yeah, you can point the finger at the referees, and we will do, but there's only so many times you can do that when it keeps happening, right? You can't keep saying it's the referee's fault. He can say that I deny what happened against Spurs happened, but unfortunately, what preceded that red card was the worst 40 minutes for a long time, so it's not like it was worth. United had already conceded a goal where they'd been knifed through butter. And yesterday they just didn't respond. But yeah, sorry, go on. Yesterday, second half, Ten Hag fails to respond. West Ham take control of it. So even before the penalty, it was a damning indictment of everything that's going on at United at the moment.
Yeah, and this is why I passed a comment earlier on that the manager just can't instill confidence in these players, and they collapse at the mere sight of pressure. As much as I don't like to give Gary Neville any kudos, he's right. Any half decent team can beat Manchester United now if they put it up to them. It's that it and we have, I'm confident that we have a very, very good squad. I was really, really confident going into the season. After he got, the players that he wanted. These are the players that he asked for. These are the players that he wanted. This is the structure that he said he wanted, and he got it all. And it's got worse. And I don't know how. And I can only put it down to the fact that he just can't motivate these players. Now you can blame the players as well, but every club has that same situation. It stems from the manager. It really does. And unfortunately, we're just in that situation now where mentally we're weak, and the only way you can change that is the only sensible way you can change that is to get rid of all the players that are weak, but you can't do that. That's just not logical, or that's not. It's just not from a money perspective. It's just not doable. So what do you do next? The next thing is, well, what other change could we make that will actually help us to even take the risk of having that happen? And that's to get rid of the manager. We just you can see it coming. You can see it coming. The collapse. You can sense it in the players. You really can. From the high fives to blocking a corner, which is absolutely ludicrous. High fiving each other when someone knocks it out for a corner, to collapsing. These players are mentally weak. And I'm not just talking about Manchester United. I think in general the players nowadays are very mentally weak. But when you get a bunch of them together, you could see what was going to happen yesterday. Once we got past that hour mark, and you could start to see the pressure, easing off, and then players are just kind of looking at each other, thinking, "What do we do next?" And then they scored, and I was actually surprised we pulled one back. I really was. I thought, "Here we go, 2-3-0." I think an unfair result was still 1-1 because we were a better team. But and I know we'll get on to the penalty now, but we should have never have to rely on a penalty. And what's happened now is the best thing that happened for Erik Ten Hag yesterday was that penalty.
Yeah.
In a crazy way, because that's all we're talking about. We're not talking about the fact that this is a shit show.
Well, we haven't yet. We haven't talked about it yet, and I do think.
In general, the media, everyone.
Yeah.
Alan Shearer's talking about the penalty. They're taking pity on us now. That's what they're doing. Alan Shearer saying, that was the worst penalty decision he's ever seen. When would Shearer ever say anything like that? It's pathetic at the moment.
You've got to wait for the worst decision to be able to see it, haven't you?
And by the way, Dan, I know what you're doing by throwing Carlo's name in there at Everton. I know what you're doing. Carlo's my man, and we're going to get onto that, because I'm sure we're going to talk about what next if we do that. But Ancelotti at Everton, come on. I don't even think Ferguson could have done anything at Everton. But, to put that in the same situation as Manchester United and Erik Ten Hag is not. It's apples to oranges, really. Look at the squad that Manchester United have. Look at the players that he was allowed to bring in. Look at the structure that he has. And we're still talking about, it was the ref's fault yesterday. It wasn't. It was Erik Ten Hag's.
Dan says, I don't think these were all the players he asked for. I really don't. Had United gone and signed Kane last summer, we'd be in a wildly different position.
Yeah, but the thing with the argument with Kane is, and everyone knows this, Manchester United, anyone dealing with Daniel Levy, it's an absolute nightmare and it's a shit show. Kane was never going to go to Manchester United, no matter how much United offered. I don't believe, because Levy doesn't want to deal with United, and clubs in England don't want to deal with him. These are Erik Ten Hag's players.
Yeah,
that's what they are. He wanted them, he got them. And I get the argument about, Ugarte and Scott McTominay, but at the end of the day, if the manager didn't want him, he would have said it, but he didn't. He wanted him, he got him, and he got all the players that he got. He got all the strikers that he wanted, and none of them could hit a barn door. It's ridiculous.
Apart from Kane, we did want Kane. That's
100%. I think we did want Kane. I don't think, but who wouldn't?
No, yeah. I'm just saying he did want him and we didn't get him. So that is fact. Dan says
we can't blame We can't. Sorry, Wayne. We can't blame the last 2 years on the fact that we didn't sign Harry Kane.
No, I'm not. I'm certainly not doing that. I'm just pointing out in isolation. One simple fact is that we wanted him. Okay, so Mike says I was told by club legend recently that Ten Hag is tactically astute and knows the game, but he is boring. If this translates to training and team meetings, are the players uninspired by him? It's a good point. Johnny says, I feel he's no longer able to G the team up. Maybe they don't like how he wants them to play. Either way, he needs to go. We need a change. Ruby Murray says, too many excuses. Take responsibility for the team. Alex McBurney, Ten Hag needs to go. He is clueless. It's clear the players don't want to play for him. They've down tools. We're 14th in the league. What position will we be? We're Manchester United. We deserve better.
Can I just come in on that one, man? I had the assumption a few weeks ago that he'd lost the dressing room, and that was an emotional reaction after a game. I don't think he's lost the dressing room. I really don't. I think these players want to do well for him, but Mike brings up a point that has was seeded in my head a long time ago. I don't think these players know how to play for this guy. That's the problem. I think the way he comes across, and I just don't. There's definitely a communication issue there. They look confused on the pitch. I certainly don't believe he's lost the dressing room. I really don't. But there's definitely confusion there. And 3 years into the job, there shouldn't be. There really shouldn't be. And I think that's at the crux of all this, is that I don't think these players understand how he wants to play. I really don't. That may sound silly, but they look confused at times. And then when we go a goal down, they completely collapse. And if the manager can't see that every time we go a goal down, we collapse and isn't trying to fix that after 3 years, it's a bigger problem. There's definitely an issue between the players and the manager in how they want to play. And that's it. I believe is at the root of it.
Well, one thing that is true and is a pattern which Patrick has pointed out, and it is unfortunately something that's gone through Ten Hag's reign, is the away record has been quite dreadful, with the exception of Villa Park last season. Patrick says, why is Ten Hag's record at traditionally tough away grounds so poor? Example, 3 defeats on the trot at West Ham. I didn't realise he lost all 3 there. We weren't that good. But yeah, this point, I mean, it's not just them, it's every single away game that we've seen to add is really, really, really poor, especially in Europe as well. What do we put that down to, Dave? Because, I mean, that's 3 years. That's not a problem that he inherited, really. I know we were poor towards the end of Ollie's time and Rangnick's time, but under Ollie we had that record where we were unbeaten we've got our record unbeaten away run under Ollie. That went on for a long time, so we could do it then. We had a good record in tactical some away games in that time as well, but it's not been the case under Ten Hag. Do you think that that's another stick to beat him with?
Yeah, I mean, his away record is terrible. We all know that. I mean, given the 2 away games in Europe recently, I mean, those 2 teams were easily there for the taking, and we drew both of them. He's just, I mean, you could look. It's a hard one to put your finger on, okay? Because Ollie went 29 odd games, away from home unbeaten, and you just get into that rhythm. We've had some really disastrous home defeats as well, really disastrous, and we're horrendous away. The reason is because the manager right now that we have is not up to it. regardless of home and away. We go into home games praying that we'll win. Where most of the top teams, it's a given. They know that, they're going to win.
Yeah.
So my point is that home or away, there is no distinction. We just stumble over the line at home. Fulham, Brentford. Come on. We should be annihilating teams like that. And that's no disrespect to them. But let's be honest, we didn't annihilate them. And we scarcely won against them. And then we had Tottenham come, we had Liverpool come, we got our ass handed to us.
Yeah.
So there's really no distinction in the confidence of home or away anymore with Manchester United. Teams come and smell blood, and this team just collapses under that.
I was doing a little bit of research on this yesterday because I was looking at that and like thinking, when was the last time we were a couple of goals up at half time? Were we a couple of goals up by the hour mark where we saw the game out comfortably? And we've got Everton last season where we were 2-0 up, and we scored 2 penalties. Rashford and Fernandes scored penalties. Then before that, you got the West Ham game where Garnacho and Højlund, where they did where they all sat on the side of the pitch. That famous picture of them all. And then before that, you've got to go to, I think the Everton game away, where we won 3-0. Garnacho scored, but even that was I think it was after the hour mark when we really got settled in that match. And then before that, you've got to go to Leicester 18 months ago. Do you know what I mean? It's just not, there's not a pattern. If I'm able to pick out 3 or 4 games in 18 months, you shouldn't be able to do that. You should be saying it's a regular thing with a big club that they go a couple of goals up. Like City, how many times that we've seen them, they're 3 goals up by 15, 20 minutes. And that is indicative of the strength of the league as well. So if United are that poor in a poor league, then questions do need to be asked. Rory says, I don't think they've down tools. We've seen that before. I think they are playing to his instructions, but it's just not creative enough. It's more boring than Van Gaal's side, and that's saying something. Robbie says, morning, gents, on this blue bank holiday, blank as well, in Wicklow. It is difficult to see. You can't. The book does stop with the manager. This is a good point from Dan. Tell you what is horrible. It feels like Liverpool in the 90s. They had the luxury of not having social media. Also feels like Arsenal of the sort of last 10 years. Prior to Arteta being there, where and unfortunately I've got all social media to track all. There are plenty of people ready to make a mockery of themselves on social media to elevate the hysteria around United. They're willing to throw United under the bus, and I hate doing that. I hate coming on this podcast when we've lost a game and when it's been farcical like it was yesterday, or heavy like it has been against Spurs and Liverpool, or in countless other games in the last 2 years. Because I want to, obviously we want to talk about good things, but at the same time, I can't bring myself to be so hysterical, to be saying saying terrible things about everyone at the club. About the manager, the players. I just can't bring myself to do it because I want to support them. I want them to, you've still got an attachment to them. We go there every other week, and some people go every week, home and away and everything like that. So, we've got a couple more comments before we get on to the penalty. Mike says, did you see the Instagram post by Xavi's missus yesterday? I don't follow Xavi's missus. No, I don't, Mike, so I can't be. He says, their lad was sitting next to Xavi wearing a United shirt. There you go. Breadcrumbing at his finest. Johnny says, bang on Dave. Teams no longer fear us, even at Old Trafford. That is unacceptable. Box says, do you think we could be drawn into a relegation battle? Naughty, we're not having that conversation on this. Okay, let's talk about the penalty. We've been half an hour in. Somehow we've not talked about the penalty. Let's get going. So, a few weeks ago, we saw Bruno Fernandes half-heartedly go into a challenge, then pull away, and he got sent off anyway. Danny Ings does this to De Ligt, pulls out, handles the ball. There's contact to coming together, and yet De Ligt is the aggressor. A penalty is conceded. Not at first. At first, it's seen as a normal coming together, which is seen everywhere in every facet of the pitch. Physical contact in a physical game. A few minutes go by. It's time to review the decision, Michael Oliver says in a van. He says, no, you've got to go back and check this because there's a clear and obvious error. So the referee goes to check his clear and obvious error. Only you would think a clear and obvious error because of the threshold that's been set by PGMOL in pre-season is once or twice you're going to have to view that. But we see him looking at that same clip, one clip, by the way, one angle, not another angle, not the angle that shows Danny Ings handling the ball. So he doesn't even see that angle. He sees one angle, one time, two time, three time, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Enough times for all the players to be stood around watching him watch it, saying what on earth is going on. Enough time for Delit to be over there, and we know he's not the quickest. He got over there. He can watch what the referee's watching, and he's able to make comment on the facts that, oh, look, you can see that there's nothing going on, and we can all see there's nothing going on. And you think, all right, well, he's watched it 3 or 4 times. There's no way he can conclude that that's a penalty, and yet he does somehow. And we can only wait with bated breath to see when that audio gets released, because it will do, what they're talking about to conclude that that's a penalty, because it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I've seen, and this isn't a Manchester United bias kind of thing, or even saying there's corruption against United. I'm not an Arsenal fan. I'm not going to go that far. I'll just say there's terrible refereeing. We've seen it 3 times this season for United, but against United, and I can see why the manager would complain again. The Bruno one against Spurs, I thought Bruno gave the referee a decision to make. So even though I thought, we've had the appeal got rescinded, the card got rescinded and everything like that, I still felt like Bruno took some culpability for that. He should do, because he made the referee make a decision in a game where he was dying to give a red card, and he made that happen. And then the game against Brentford last week, all right, we can have a go at United's physios and doctors for not stitching up Delit quicker, but the referee had terrible control of that and put United down to 10 men at a critical time when they knew that Brentford they wouldn't get a counter, so they could put as many men forward as they wanted. They could bombard that box in different areas that they wouldn't do normally in the ebb and flow of a football match. So they've actually influenced a goal being scored there, and they did that yesterday. I mean, I really don't. It's so bad. It's so bad a decision that I was furious after, not just obviously because it's impacted United, and we could be sitting here and I think we've been fair in the criticism that we've been given Ten Hag there, because we're talking about it in isolation away from this decision. But livelihoods are determined. Title races, relegation races now are going to be determined by referees whose job, by the way, is to officiate a game of football, not to influence. They're not there to influence the game. They're not there to do anything that determines the pattern of a game of football. They're there to officiate and impose the rules and instruct the rules and allow a game to flow as much as it could. There's a contact sport, what they are officiating. That was a contact moment. And at another angle, if he'd have bothered to look at another angle, might have said, oh, that could be a foul. Or even if you're going to be Bruno Fernandes about it, a red card on Ings, if you're going to be really ridiculous, even though I think that that's ridiculous. And he's given a penalty. He's given a penalty for contact because these are coming together. I'm astounded. I couldn't see the offence when they showed it, like the first few times. When probably 5 or 6 times into what we were seeing in the replay, I thought, all right, I think I know what he's actually looking for now. But it took that many times to see it. And then it was kind of like, it can't be that. It can't be that. And it was that. And the penalty was awarded, and it was scored, and the game was won by West Ham. Before I'm going to ask you, Dave, obviously give you a chance to talk about it. Mike says, if I gave that penalty yesterday morning during my Sunday league match, I would have been chased off the pitch. It is astonishing it got to the review stage, let alone that it was given. Dan says, on the pen, these decisions cost jobs. Had we won yesterday, which we should and could after our goal, this decision will now likely get the manager fired. Now we can argue it isn't just one game, but had we won, there would be no talk of the sack this week. Absolutely, that is the point I was trying to make there, but you did it in a much more succinct way and concise way. You know, I like to ramble. Dave, talk me through why that was a penalty.
Well, it wasn't. Next question.
No, talk me through your view of it then.
In one sense, I'm just thinking, well, this is our look. You know, this is our look. And we could argue that Ten Hag has had, you know, not the best of luck at Manchester United. I still don't think he's the man for the job, but I do believe that he's had some really shitty luck, you know, with the injuries that we've had. And then, you know, with Bruno sending off against Tottenham, and now there's West Ham. This is by far the worst penalty decision since the 1985 FA Cup final. It is in any game, whether it's junior, women's soccer, whatever. It was absolutely farcical. And I have no clue. When he went to the monitor and he had to watch it a couple of times, I'm thinking to myself, normally in a penalty situation, boom, he goes, oh, just want a second look. Yep, I believe it's a penalty. It was like, if you would have turned the game off at that split second and went back on, you think, oh, it's half time. That's how long it took. It was like, why is he still trying to decide this? And you know what? The thing that did infuriate me as well was one angle. That is just unbelievable. Yeah. It's like you can make any, you could flip any decision based off one angle. If you have the right angle. And that one was probably the worst angle to have. But even at that, when I say it was the worst angle, it still made no sense that he gave the penalty. It was ridiculous. And after the game, Jamie O'Hara, Clinton Morrison, Alan Shearer, all three of them who despise United and will make stuff up just to make it look like, you know, well, that was a fair decision, or United are this, or you know, certain things that go their way, they'll say the complete opposite when you're like, you're only saying that for clicks. All three came out and said it was the worst decision they've ever seen in a penalty. But yet here we are, we get beat. Ten Hag this will go towards his second, you know, because that will be put up there. I think he's only a game or two away from it. I honestly thought he should have gone a few weeks ago. I think we're done. I don't see him being able to flip this around, but what will happen is the referee association will come out and they'll say, yeah, we made an error. They'll demote him for a game to the championship for a week or two, and then he'll be back again. And then Michael Oliver will be reffing us again in a few weeks' time, and we'll give an absolutely ludicrous decision again. This is just, that man should not be allowed to referee in the Premier League. I'm sorry. His bias is just how no one else can see it. It's phenomenal. I mean, I don't think there's people in the background conspiring against Manchester United. Like you said, that's an Arsenal conspiracy theorist that they think everyone's against them, and they've all met to say, let's do this to Arsenal, as if Arsenal are a massive challenge to anybody and they're trying to stop the juggernaut of Arsenal. Not happening, mate. It's these bad decisions are happening because the officials are terrible.
Yeah.
If you equate that to a player in any Premier League team, he wouldn't even be in the squad. That's the level of bad performances we're getting every week from these guys, and there's no accountability at all. Now we'll eventually hear the audio, as you said, and then we'll all just get angry again and realize that it all sounded like bullshit. But at the end of the day, the decision was made, and it astounded everyone. I don't think I've come across anyone that said that was a penalty. We even have Liverpool supporters feeling sorry for us now. I think the VAR technology was a good idea, but until they get people that can actually use it and be able to be confident in it, it should be scrapped. It's absolutely ridiculous.
And the purpose of it is to remove emotion from. You're
Yes.
supposed to look at it, and it's meant to be. It's like a sterile, objective point of view where you just look at it and you go like, all right, well, this is this is
But
what it
Wayne,
is.
it's got worse. The game has got worse. It
No,
really has.
what I mean is
Decisions have got worse. It was supposed to be brought in as well to because some really bad decisions have been made before VAR come in. But I always said, and you know this, it evens itself out over the season. But it's getting worse. I mean, if I was a Wolves supporter, I'd probably stop going because I'd be thinking, what's going to be given against us this week? And we benefit from one of those decisions a couple of seasons ago, but it was still farcical. Yeah. And this whole VAR thing, like I said, the technology is great, but until they can actually get it onto the NFL level, where it's an instant decision, and it's rare that you could debate an NFL decision. There has been one or two down the years, but you could probably, if you follow the NFL, you could probably recall them. Yeah. This is every week.
Yeah, and by the way, it's not to do with the technology; it's to do with the people making the decisions. Exactly. And yesterday's the biggest example of it all, because how you can. There's no one looking at that thinking that that's a penalty. Nobody's looking at that thinking that's a penalty. So what is going through the head of the person who's making that decision? Because then, if 99% of people are wrong, that person knows that there won't be enough recourse to punish that person, and exactly. he's not gonna lose his job, but he can influence and determine. Now, you said this could earn it, level itself out over a season. It might well do for United. They might get 2 or 3 equally dodgy decisions, and they probably will, because you're going to see our players do the things that we hate to see, which is going to be like throwing themselves around. Bruno's going to be doing it, trying to act to get that decision back. But it'll be too late for Ten Hag. It'll be too late for him. And I'm not saying, he massively deserves another chance. I'm saying you are making a decision. You are influencing. You are determining the result of that football match when that is not your job. Your job is to officiate for the laws and the rules of the game, and you have taken an opportunity. You've taken an opportunity there, and I cannot understand. It's so infuriating to me because you can't. There's no recourse. There's a brick wall. Well, Van walls around this guy. Doesn't have to explain himself. He will come out, and they've had this sort of the VAR, was it the VAR announcement on Twitter was kind of like, it was just what we knew. We just said what it was. He said, oh, well, the referee didn't award a penalty, and then they reviewed it and did give a penalty. Well, yeah, that's what happened. But I think what we actually know what happened is quite a bit different to that.
No, we want to know what deciding factor in the referee's head. We want him to explain why he thought it was a penalty. Yeah. That's what we want to know. We want to know what made you think, after looking at that 20 times, that changed your decision from on the pitch to the first time you've seen in a replay to the 20th time that you just say, oh yeah, now it is a penalty.
And the other thing as well is that what we haven't even mentioned, the 3 words clear and obvious.
No, that's
clear and obvious. So he's got to have made a clear and obvious mistake. Now, if he's reviewed that twice and it's not clear and obvious, then that's the end. That's the end of the discussion. But he watched it 10 times. 2, by the way, watching it 10 times accentuates the fact that it wasn't clear and obvious, and then he still went and gave it. You can't do that. That is.
Do you think though? Do you think because it's rare that a referee goes against VAR? That is rare. Do you think these referees are just afraid of that? Do you think that that's where they're, I mean, I'm not gonna get online. I'm thinking, well, they've been leaned towards. Listen, we need VAR. VAR has to stay. You got to make it look good. So even if you're on the fence with the decision, give it the VAR because we need that extra point. Again, I'm not going to be a conspiracy theorist, but it's just too many times they've gone to that monitor and they've gone with VAR when you can clearly see that that's not the case. And like I said, a point of case with a lot of the Wolves decisions, it's farcical. They seem to be afraid to go against what VAR said. That's a big factor in all this.
Yeah. Box says this is our look this season. Xerxes sitting in the goal versus Brighton. So Garnacho's goal disallowed. Yeah, I forgot all about that. I mean, that's just unfortunate, that one. But I mean, that's the fault when you descend into this kind of nonsense. Then you are a team that are really down on its luck. Dillit's blood down to 10 men versus Brentford, like we talked about. Bruno's 2 unjust red cards that cost us. Dan says Val should make decisions based on watching back at normal speed. If you slow things down and look at every angle, then you can start to doubt yourself. The game is played at pace, and VAR should only look at a decision at the same pace as a ref would. Box says, since Klopp's petulant outburst, United hardly ever receive a penalty and never get the rub of the green with VAR. We've seen Maguire have valid goals choked off. Casemiro's harsh VAR calls pens against us. Mike, when you add how poor these referees are with the unconscious bias that clearly exists and mix it with inconsistent use of VAR, it is just a recipe for disaster. Johnny, Oliver should be made to explain his decision. If he can't, he should be disciplined and fired.
I don't think he can explain his decision. That's going to be the problem.
Yeah, Boxer, I'm surprised Wolves fans haven't descended up to Stockley Park. Julie says the amount of emotional energy spent on this, referees should be ashamed on themselves, and the players need to take a long, hard look at their performance. On the other hand, United should have stuffed West Ham earlier. Yep, absolutely. Dan says spot on Box, very unlucky. Bowen even said I didn't think it was a penalty. Simon Corbett says, morning gents. Do you think Ten Hag would get the City, Arsenal, or Liverpool job? If the answer is no, he shouldn't be United manager. Well, that's a good point, and I would say he was probably in the conversation for any of that before he became Man United manager, so I can understand why he got the job. However, yeah, it's a fair point to make now, and every passing week provides evidence to support the idea that he shouldn't be. By the way, 1,000 of you watching at the moment, thanks. It's a really big stream for us, so I really appreciate the thing and all the comments.
I think it's the glasses. I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, well, someone needs to be able to check decisions and to have that 2020 vision. Yeah, so appreciate the support on that. So we'll talk about Ten Hag then. So the evidence that suggests he can turn it around is obviously the credit in the bank, which is kind of gone now. The big game performances, which have been very, very few and far between. But the evidence that supports him really is that once we've got the players back that are still out, then there'll be a greater balance to the side and greater conviction of the argument that they'll play the way that he wants to, and the way that he wants to play will be strong enough that United will turn around this run of results. The idea that he will inspire the kind of confidence that turns this around, that those missed chances will turn into goals, that United will blossom in confidence, and that the kind of force that we've seen, and I'm talking like even going to the end of the Liverpool Cup game, like when, it's just all the nonsense at the end of it. You're just playing Anthony at left back and Bruno in centre back, and you're just leaving it to the elements of the chaos theory, and there's nothing by design. But you have to, in order to support a manager, you have to have 95% confidence that everything that he's doing is by design, or 5% saying, well, he's also lucky. He's also lucky in that the things that aren't by design are working out. Now, the problem is that United are too often susceptible to prone to these chaotic moments happening. We saw it against Brighton. We saw it against Spurs. Even like late on against Fulham to win. We've seen it in too many games already this season when you want to see stability. And even the better moments where we played well in the first half against Crystal Palace and we played well in the first half against West Ham, you never had conviction that was because the opponent wasn't great. So when they got better and United like tailed off in the second halves of those games, you said, what have you got now? And there's been nothing. There has been nothing. So there's nothing from the evidence that we've seen that suggests that there's confidence in the manager turning it around. And I'm not here to advocate for change. I'm not here to say Ten Hag should be sacked. I'll never do that about a manager who's in charge of the football club. And that doesn't mean I'm blindly supporting him. I'm saying that there's very little confidence in the evidence that we've got so far this season that he can turn it around. But that's basically it now. But isn't it? You are now investing in all of the games that happen from this point. You are now investing in the hope that the players will bring the balance, and that confidence from those performances will start to result in goals and more confidence. That the leaving yourself open to those vulnerable moments, the chaotic moments, the bad refereeing, being so influential in determining the result of a game, they won't be as vulnerable as that anymore, and that the confidence of the team will blossom, and this will start to look like a proper Manchester United side. That's what needs to happen now, from today, in every game, and it needs to be a run of you need to have conviction in that run. Can you remember Ten Hag after the World Cup in 2018, or when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer first got the job as temporary manager, and you saw a run of 15 to 20 games where we played well-ish, not in all of the games and not in all of the ones under Ten Hag either, but after the World Cup, that run of games where we were winning a lot of games, we knew how to win, and we were winning fairly comfortably, playing fairly good football, and we ended up winning the League Cup at the end of that run with Ten Hag, and there's been very little evidence of that scene since. Now, it needs to happen right now, otherwise it's hard to see how anyone can have confidence in it continuing.
It reminds me, sorry to say this, Wayne, but it reminds me of that episode of The Office where they had the two quizzes. When the real quiz started, when they threw the shoe over the roof. It's like, okay, this is when it starts. This is it. I've been waiting for us to kick on for over a year now, I was very vocal of Ollie staying. I really was, right up until he left, because there was more things going on in the background that we know that for me was heart-wrenching, that he would lose his job over. And listen, don't get me wrong. I think he had to go in the end, but I supported him all the way through to the end because of the pile of shit he picked up from Mourinho, both on the pitch and off the pitch, and fixed most of it. It just went south at the end, and he had to go. David Moyes was the only manager that made me rethink my choice of sport, because it was just terrible. It was terrible. I was even thinking about Formula One, if we can call that a sport, but we don't. I'm just, the inevitable is going to happen with Ten Hag, and we just, if you remember, you and I had this conversation a few years ago about Van Gaal, that United held on to Van Gaal for way too long. They just did. And yeah, listen, I'm delighted we did, because he won an FA Cup, but nobody would have thought that when we got to December, and we were thinking, this is just diabolical. This is the worst we've seen in a long time. It's going to get worse under Ten Hag, is my opinion. I really believe that. We're not at the bottom yet. There is no line in the sand, Wayne, I'm afraid, to go, okay, right, starting now, we're going to be good. I just don't see how he turns this around. And it's unfortunate, because when Ten Hag came in, I was, he was the only manager I wanted. He really was. When we were out looking, he was the only guy I wanted. I didn't want Pochettino. I didn't want anyone else. I wanted him, and it's just not worked out. And sometimes you got to put your hands up and say, "It's done. We're done. We can't do this anymore." The players are a big part of the problem as well. The amount of chances they miss, but we can't keep using that single excuse. The past couple of years, last season, it was injuries, which I agree with. We had a lot of injuries, but he still made some really brain dead decisions, in my opinion. This year, all we're doing is delaying the inevitable. He should have gone after Tottenham. That was it. And then the argument is, well, who do we bring in? What we do is, and it may be too early to do this, but we're 14th in the league. We ain't winning the Premier League, and we're not even getting into the top four. We put Van Nistelrooy in there for the rest of the season. That's it. That's what we do, because it's not going to get better under Ten Hag. So if Ineos is thinking, well, we got to wait until we don't get top four. No, we're not going to get top four anyway. So you remove them, and you take the gamble with Van Nistelrooy, because right now we're not taking any gambles. We're just terrible, and we're just trotting along. And next summer you go after a manager, and there's numerous ones out there. They're all employed, but that doesn't mean you still can't get them.
Yeah.
The whole hierarchy that Manchester United have now, we're employed by other clubs. The Newcastle one nearly ended up in court, but Ineos was like, we don't care. We're still going to take your man. And why aren't we we do that with players all the time. They're under contract. The club's adamant they're not going to sell, but there's a price.
Yeah.
If you want to be the best, go out and pay for the best.
Well,
and it doesn't matter if they're in another job. I mean, just go and get them. Pay the money, get them in, because I believe that the majority of these players are good. I think they are good. I think Ten Hag has made some good signings. He really has. He's just not been able to make it work. And a really good manager will. And there's plenty of good managers out there. Pay the money and get it. I don't know why we have this mental block of, well, we can't get Simeone because he's in a job, or we can't get we can't get, I don't know, do we even say the Pep word, because we know he's going to leave? There's a million different reasons why we should go after top managers, and the reason we don't go after him shouldn't be because he's employed, because players are employed by clubs, executives are employed by clubs. Go after them, pay them money. Now, my final thing is, can Manchester United afford to sack Ten Hag? It also has to be in the conversation from a money standpoint. Do we have the money to sack him? We got to ask that question as well. Is that
yeah? I mean, budgeting, we couldn't do it last season. I think that it was difficult to being able to justify that last season. I don't know this season, because they gave him an extension, didn't they? They triggered an extension in the contract rather than give him a new contract. I think, for me, just looking at it objectively.
Sorry, Wayne, real quick. I'm really sorry, but the triggering of the contract was to pretend that they had confidence in him, because we all know they went out to get another manager, and now that was just to throw it out there. Oh, we're so confident in the manager we have, we're going to trigger the 1 year already. That was complete bullshit. It was PR.
Well, I think that one of the things is that there was the names that they were going out and talking to, like Tuchel, they weren't really massively inspiring. So I think it was a safe kind of gamble, in that they might risk upsetting Ten Hag a little bit, but they'd at least gauge some public opinion on, what people would think about if that decision was to be made, and it wasn't massively convincing. So it was like, better stick with what you've got and invest in that, because that's something that we'd not seen yet. That was a hymn sheet that people were singing from. They couldn't have made a decision. Obviously when they came in, it was obvious that setup wasn't working. So they made all those changes and decided to bring people in. But you couldn't say that about the manager, because the argument that was made was that the manager wasn't being backed because the environment wasn't right around him. And that was the noise that was being made from Ineos. And they said, we'll walk to the walk to the right decision rather than run to the wrong decision, is the words that we use in the press. So I can understand why that decision wasn't made in the moment, and the longer that you go on, you think, well, the reason why there's a delay in this is probably, firstly, conviction in available candidates, or a candidate who's not available, whoever the desired candidate, the conviction they've got to have because it's going to be their first appointment, right? It's their first major decision to sack the manager, so they've got to be confident that they've not gone too soon with that. Even though if we're all looking at that saying, all right, well, Spurs might have seemed like the end for most of us logically, they've still got to make that decision, and they will be judged harshly on that decision. They've got to make that right. And if they go and make that decision and just bring in a caretaker, I don't think that shows that they've got conviction of their opinion, really. I don't, because I feel like that says they don't know either. I think that's a worrying decision, unless there's some kind of clear directive in there. And people will say rude, it's better than nothing, and it needs a morale boost and everything like that. But it's still a massively political decision to make, and they've got to be seen to show leadership. So I can understand how the landscape lies with that and how difficult that decision is to make at the moment. However, you want to see strong leadership. That's what we need to see. That's what they're there to provide. So, and it doesn't have to be a name that we've thought of. It can be someone who, you would like, Xabi Alonso or someone like, I'm not saying Guardiola or Klopp, but something left field that you wouldn't think was doable, but they're doing it because they're sending a message, and that's the improvement that we need to see. To have conviction in the belief that they're doing the right thing. So it is a big decision for them to make, and I can understand why they would want to take the time in doing it, and I appreciate the fact that they're actually giving, you made earlier, the Van Gaal comparison is a really strong one, but what we all wondered at the time was, what would it have looked like if we'd have given him a little bit more time and this is probably what it would have looked like. So we've got the evidence there. We appreciate the patience being given, but I think we're at a point where we want to see some kind of strong leadership somewhere. Either we see that from the manager and there's a massive turnaround of unlikely proportions at this point, which we all want to see because we all want to see United play well, or it comes above him where the structure removes him and has some idea in place. Loads of comments in. I'm just going to run through them all quickly. Rory says the idea of injuries coming back now is a joke. In theory, only Shaw comes back. If he's hanging his job on Luke Shaw being fit, he should be at the job centre already, which is, fair. Box says it will get to a stage soon that a change is inevitable. Mike says, finish on a positive, gents. We'll come to that. I will come to that, yeah. I'll come to that because that's how I will finish. Simon says 7-0 to Liverpool was a line in the sand. Probably would have been if we did not won the League Cup the week before. Tony Barton. We've got a few Bartons in the comments today. No relations, but great to see you all.
No, because these Bartons talk sense. Sorry, go ahead.
Tony says, hi guys, definitely not a penalty on Ten Hag's job and potential sacking. I feel like we're looking for a better team. We're looking at a better team over the last few games. Some poor misses from our forwards and defenders, maybe a confidence problem. We were talking about that on the pod. Ten Hag has made some shocking substitute decisions over his 10 years, but we've had numerous managers since Sir Alex, and none of them have really been successful. I think we're a couple of bits of good luck, and Ten Hag having the balls to stop using the same 2-3 underperforming. Sam says, Mike, play the under-18s. We'll talk about the under-18s in a second. Shaw and Manu. What is the real fair expectation of our current squad? We're not 14th level, but I don't think we're a great squad either. I think that we could have expected that we're getting to the Champions League this time around. Over 1,100 of you watching, guys. Really appreciate that. Say that we're not going to be hysterical and start saying things like all the players should be sacked as well as the manager, or we hate such and such. It's quite a nice audience. Thanks for that. Mike says, finish on a positive, gents, and mention the under-18s. Obi Martin's 14-minute hat-trick, a team stacked with talent. Let's hope they develop over the next few years. Yeah, it's unfortunate, really, that it's the 18s and not the 23s, right? Because they've got to see them have a step up. Because when you see the first team struggling, and you think that injection of confidence, but you don't want to put the players skipping a step in their education, really. And Bobby Martins is one. Shea Lacey, who's a fantastic talent as well. A lot of talent in that age bracket. Leicester will be too soon for them in the League Cup, but it'd be nice to see, Amas, he's got to get a game. He's got to be on the bench. You've got to give him some minutes at some point. It's nice to see that there is some genuine talent in there coming through that, you would think at some point. I mean, 18's not too young these days, you know what I mean? You can get them in the first team squad, but they've also got to have that step up to the next level. The under 23s got to test the temperament there, unless you've just got the confidence to go, do you know what, sod it, get them all in. What do you make of the under 18s? Obviously, the Obi Martin's 14-minute hat-trick is the big news of the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, he scored after the first minute, didn't he?
10 seconds, yeah.
Listen, it's great to have a lot of this talent coming through, but are we ever going to see it come through if the manager doesn't take a risk? We chased Obi Martins for all of the summer and parts of last season. This kid's supposed to be the next greatest thing ever. He's 16 years of age. Why can't we play him? Why can't we play him? I mean, having Barcelona thrown 16-year-olds out into the new camp, an even more daunting place to go. We've got strikers that can't hit the back of the net on a consistent basis. Why do we have this mental block that, we got to bet them in, it's got to take them a few years, it's got to do this? I mean, if Everton had that same attitude, Wayne Rooney wouldn't have become the player that he was, Yeah. I know it's all cliche. If they're good enough, they're old enough. If this continues, why aren't we bringing in these players? Yeah. It's great it's great, but the future. I'm sounding like a politician now. The future is now, and it is. Look, start betting some of these players and bring them in. And I know a few of them have been in around the first team, and that's great and all. But that's like going to the pub with your parents and staying there till after 8 o'clock. You're like, oh, this is what it's like after 8 o'clock. Just put them in. Throw them a beer. We'll be grand. I definitely think we should definitely start looking at bringing these players through at a younger age. This whole thing of waiting and waiting and waiting. Because what will happen is, we'll get another change of manager and another change, and we could be 2 managers down the line by the time we're supposed to be ready for these players. They're good enough. Put them in the squad, throw them on with 10, 15 minutes to go, and then see how they perform like that. And we all know that younger players seem to have no fear for the majority of the time. They really don't. There's no pressure on them. They don't have massive social media following. The media haven't copped onto them yet. So those first maybe 5 or 6 games are where they have the most freedom. And then that's where they can build their confidence.
Yeah.
I would just bring them in now. Considering our current situation, we're 14th in the league. We can't score for shit. Why not bring them in? We chased them long enough. We went through that whole legal BS with I believe it got to that part with Arsenal, or nearly got to that part where there was going to be like legal talk of the way he was approaching, the way he left. If he's that good, don't wait 3 or 4 years. Oh, we got to wait till he's 19. No, put him in now. If he's scoring a hat-trick in his first game, over the next 3 to 4 weeks, let's just bet him in. And not just him. There's a few players in that team that could put some of our players to shame, that will come in, and will come in with that fighting spirit, and they have poisoned by the lack of confidence that's in the team. I would bring them.
I get that. I see the League Cup is a good opportunity to that, or the Europa League. I just think Mike says about Lamine Yamal at Barcelona being a great example. Box says give Amas a debut. I think that's the sensible one. You'd want to have some of them in the team. Again, Box there saying Gore and Collier in the cup.
And Collier disappeared after the Liverpool game, and even though Ten Hag left them to die out there, and not just Ten Hag, but the players left them to die out there.
Yeah, the players.
It's frustrating. These players are not doing it.
No, but
you can't just keep being repetitive and playing the same bullshit over and over again. You got to make a change.
My concern with that is that making those kind of wholesale changes now is the very sign of a manager under pressure. Do you know what I mean?
Keeping players in that can't hit the back of the net is
I'm not arguing with the logic of what you're saying. I just mean like from the what we want to see is a manager who's got strong leadership, right?
That is strong leadership by looking and saying, this player here seems to have a lot of confidence. This one here has zero confidence. I'm not saying bring 3 or 4 players in, because we know that won't work, because you can't win anything with kids, they said. So I'm saying bring in the best of the better ones and introduce them. We're crying out for someone to score goals. That kid from Arsenal, and I know it's, you're talking under 16s and a 40, but if it's all about confidence and scoring goals. If in his head all he thinks about is, I'm just going to score today, I know I am. Yeah. It doesn't matter who he's up against. It really doesn't. If he's that confident, I'm sorry, Wayne, if he's that confident, put him in there. You don't have to bring him in straight away and drop Hoyland. Put him on the bench. Bring him in for a half an hour.
Yeah.
And let's just see how he does, because what's happening now is not working.
I'm with you completely on the theory of it. I just think, like, politically speaking, when you've got a manager who's under pressure, you want to see strong leadership. And I get what you're saying, making a decision like that. But I feel like, would he risk alienating a squad that he's trying to infuse confidence into? I don't know. But, I mean, we're going to see.
And I'm sorry, on that point, and although it wasn't Van Gaal's decision, it was because of injuries and suspensions. Marcus Rashford would have never got his opportunity against Arsenal.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying about Manu was in through injuries and Garnacho was in through injuries. So he's not that he's not done it. But Amas is waited a little bit too long to pull the trigger on, because I think we needed balance there. And we would have liked to have seen him a little bit earlier. But I can also understand that, again, reticence to throw a young player in when there's a highly pressurized situation. I do respect that about him, but like I said, it's a difficult one to gauge, right? It's not. We can sit here and say like we should do this or we should do that, but he's a very difficult one to gauge. It's not just like Erik Ten Hag's decision. They'll be talking to all the academy staff about like the players' temperaments. Are they better off staying in this environment or taking a step up and everything like that? But I mean, look, I'm the theory, the history of the club, the reputation of the club, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, completely with you, 100%. I just don't. I can appreciate why it's a difficult decision, much as I can with the ownership of like when do they make a decision on it, when is too long, and like I said, maybe the best thing all round for the ownership and for Ten Hag is that penalty nonsense happened, because it's changed the context of what we're talking about this morning.
Take the gamble; it could save your job. Keep doing what you're doing, you're going to lose your job. Why not? Why not? Why not? And that's what you're talking about, leadership.
Yeah.
Make that change, because if you don't make that change, the club's going to make that change, and it's going to come fast. It's going to come pretty soon. If we don't beat Leicester in the League Cup, if we get pounded by Chelsea at the weekend, and the club hold on to Ten Hag after that, well, then they're weaker than Ten Hag is, because they can't keep allowing this to happen. They really can't. Okay. And that Chelsea game could go either way. And I personally believe that I do think we're going to beat Chelsea, and it's going to prolong the inevitable for another month or two. But if I'm saying on the flip side, if Chelsea come and win 3-0 quite comfortably and they still keep them, well, then I think that shows very, very weak leadership. Very weak leadership.
Yeah, big week for United. Johnny says, I said the same about Amas. He doesn't trust the youngsters. That's not the United way. I still don't think that's completely fair. I think he does, but it is very difficult. I think Menu and Garnacho is proof that he has done, but I didn't agree with what happened with Collier against Liverpool either. I was on this podcast talking about it. Anyway, thanks so much, guys, for tuning in. We might be back this week with an emergency podcast. Who the hell knows what's going on? If something big happens, then we will, of course, be back to talk about it. Almost 1,200 of you watching. Really, really appreciate that. If you're watching back on YouTube, please join in the conversation. We'll still comment on the comments that we get. We'll be back next week, hopefully with Paul. Paul couldn't make it because he was traveling today, but we really appreciate your time today, spending your Monday morning with us. Stay safe, stay well. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and we will be back next